The need for digital oversight is the Democratic Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar. Her new book is called Antitrust. She's also chair of the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust. Senator, welcome to the program.
Well,
Can I start by asking you, just because the Secretary of State is here, President Biden is coming here next month, to sort of tell me what you think the big agenda for him will be, talking to his colleagues in the G7, and particularly along the line, as I mentioned, what Dominic Raab said, Russian disinformation and the sort of interference in democracies is high on their agenda.
Exactly. So number one is to shore up our relations with the G7, with our allies. We know the ups and downs of the Trump era and the drama, needless drama so many times, especially when we were in the middle of the pandemic. Number two, the pandemic and getting through this, looking at what's happening in India, looking at what's happening around the world and joining forces to try to help the entire world get through this. Number three would be what you've referred to is these players like Russia who have forever sowed discontent, not just in America, but also in the European nations and across the world, to really take this on in a unified way and show that we mean what we say. And when you look at disinformation, you look at not just the hacking into the U.S. elections and that attempted hacking into it and everything that came out of that back in 2016, improvements made in 2020, we know, in protecting our elections, but still attempts made all the time. And you look at what just happened with Solar Sky. So that is going to be a major topic. And I've always believed you just can't take it on with the U.S. alone. You have to do it with our allies. And I do hope they discuss this issue of monopolies and taking on monopolies across the world, because we have things we can do with Europe, including this recent App Store investigation that was just concluded with action on the way. There's many examples on that. So there's going to be a lot on the agenda. And let me not forget climate change, something that has been a major focus of President Biden. So I personally am so glad we're into governing again and working with the rest of the world and not just waking up every day to see what the latest mean tweet is. And one of the best ways you change the world in a good way and improve relations is by reaching out to your allies with seasoned hands like Secretary of State Blinken, Jake Sullivan, and the like.
I'm going to get to antitrust and the topic that you're most energized on right now. You've just written that. But first I want to ask you, because obviously President Biden, maybe in reaction to sort of the shock therapy of the Trump presidency, he's riding a very, strong wave of public support around the world. And he also is in the United States. But I want to ask you, because he's on the road today pushing the part of his big plan that's the American Families Plan. How difficult is it going to be for him to get bipartisan support when a new poll says that only, as much as 70% of Republicans still think that he's not the legitimately elected president?
Listen, despite that, and I do wonder about those numbers, given, we're Republicans I talk to at home, despite all that, what I see is when he passed that rescue plan, working with Democrats in the Senate and in the House, that was overwhelmingly supported by a lot of Republicans and Democrats. That's why it passed. That's why the Republicans, after it passed, really couldn't go after it very much, because people were so excited that the vaccine was finally getting distributed, that our economy was getting shored up, that we were helping small restaurants, that we were helping families that were trying to juggle their kids on their knees, their toddlers on their knees and their laptops on their desks, and teaching their first graders how to use a mute button. So regardless of what that poll says, these policies, the reason that President Biden is popular right now and the reason that we've been able to continue to get things done is there is support for his policies. There's no doubt about it. There are other polls that show that, from Democrats, Republicans, and independents. So that's all I got right now. I'm just working on helping my constituents to get through this pandemic, regardless of if some people are questioning the election or what they're saying about it. I've got to keep my eye on going forward, at the same time taking on the social media companies if they're not doing enough to stop this misinformation.
Right, which is why I put that out there, because the next question is, how much of that is do you lay it at the feet of the social media companies, which inter alia you're taking on with your antitrust book and I guess legislation, whatever you can do as a senator?
Well, I first of all have to look at the conveyor of most misinformation, and that would be the former president himself, Donald Trump, which was the reason, of course, the riot, the incitement of the insurrection, that the impeachment was taking place. So we got to start there. But the second piece of it is that the way the social media companies have handled this, where they are the gatekeepers, the monopolies in each of their respective areas, has led to no competition, basically. So maybe Instagram or WhatsApp could have developed bells and whistles for privacy and misinformation. Why did that not happen? Because in the words of Mark Zuckerberg, in an email that was discovered in the House investigation, he would rather, his words, buy than compete. And as he noted, these companies were nascent. They may not be big enough, I'm paraphrasing that, but he said at the time, but if they grow, this is his words, they could be disruptive to us. So to me, that's the very definition of a monopoly. They bought up stuff so they wouldn't have any competitors. And then, for instance, in the case of Google, 90% market share on search engines. What incentive do they have to develop the kind of privacy protections that we need? That's why Europe's been going after this. That's why we do. I don't question their success. I'm pleased they've developed into incredible products. But at some point in American history, we are a country of entrepreneurship and competition. We provide the check and balance. We go after that with our antitrust laws, and the time has come for that.
So let me ask you, because, I mean, people who watch are a little sometimes disheartened, like tech experts and the tech journalists, when they watch a Zuckerberg or whoever come to Congress and frankly tie Congress in knots. And, they're just so much savvier about tech than those, I'm sorry to say, senators and congresspeople who usually do the questioning. And he has come up in the past with a pretty snappy line whereby he says, oh, you got a problem with me? Well, it's either me or Xi. In other words, my dominance is a lot better, wouldn't you say, than having the leader of the world's biggest, communist state be dominant. What do you say to that?
Through history, that is not how we've gotten ahead to where we are. We got ahead to where we are because we actually believed in capitalism and competition. And I believe in that, and so do a bunch of Republicans and Democrats. And so if you look at it that way, and you look at the mess they've created on misinformation and the like, you realize, yeah, it's good to have some strong companies, but it's also good to keep developing new companies to be able to compete with the Chinas of the world, something that is a big part of Joe Biden's foreign policy that you're going to hear about, I'm sure, when he comes to Europe. And that is making sure that our people that believe in democracy and capitalism are on the same page. And so I just believe it's just what he's saying right now to support big. And I want to see more companies and more competition. And by the way, if you think there's problems for workers right now with wages, it's really hard for them to compete when there's only one big guy in each of their areas. And throughout history, when we've taken on monopolies, whether it was the breakup of AT&T, the former chairman of AT&T said AT&T became stronger because of that, because they were forced to compete. It brought down long distance rates. It brought up the cell phone industry into this incredible competitive business. Or you look at the breakup of Standard Oil going way back, or you look at our early founders, how they didn't want to have to buy all their tea from the East India Tea Company. This is a country of entrepreneurs. And in the end, that's how you compete in the global economy, by unleashing the power of capitalism and workers and new ideas.
So you brought up all other industries that you're also writing about in the book. But in terms of big tech, because I guess it's such a powerhouse right now, Republicans, many also have problems, but they normally say, oh, we're being blocked and it's about censorship, whatever their complaints are with big tech. My question to you is there, you want to do something, presumably to legislate. I don't know whether you want to go the Europe way or is there a hybrid, but do you think there is any resolution with Republicans to get to some legislation on this?
Yes, I do. And that's what I wrote this book in a way that reached out beyond the Democratic base. I wanted to make the story and the history alive with incredible stories about, like, the founder of the Monopoly Board was actually against monopolies and going through history. And then I end with 25 ideas. And several of those ideas, many of them are bipartisan. And I'll give you some examples. The agencies right now, FTC and the Department of Justice Antitrust, can't take on the biggest companies the world has ever known with duct tape and Band-Aids. That's why Senator Grassley and I want to change the fee structure when people apply for mergers, so that that helps pay for the lawyers we need to take on the cases. They literally are a shadow of what they were during the Reagan administration. Secondly, something you know from your international work and show and focus. Look what happened in Australia with Google and Facebook. They basically tried to walk on an entire industrialized country. So that's why Senator Kennedy and I, along with Buck and Cicilline in the House, have a bipartisan bill that says, let's let our news organizations be able to coordinate on negotiating with the tech companies when it comes to paying for content. Looking backwards at what we have in terms of the tech lack of competition. Looking at pharma, we've got dozens of bills that are bipartisan that take on exclusionary conduct and make sure we have generics in the market when it comes to pharmaceutical prices. So I think it's there. We just, every time we try to advance something, honestly, Christiane, some company has influence over some senator or some rec, and it's like a game of whack-a-mole. You get it through the Trump administration, you get it through the Senate, and then someone in the House doesn't like it. So I'm just ready to expose all of this because I think that I need to do this, and it's why I wrote the book Antitrust, so people would come to my side. We need a major public support for moving forward on monopolies.
And how about on policing and justice? As you know, of course, the George Floyd Policing and Justice bill is out there. President Biden would like to see it passed, before the anniversary, which is May 25th. And I've heard some officials in the United States saying there might be some momentum. Do you think it will happen?
Yes. The tragedy, the murder of George Floyd happened in my state, not far away from where I am right now. And that trial was a moment of redemption. The witnesses that came forward who'd been holding this burden for nearly a year, where they said, one of them said, I literally keep waking up at night thinking, what could I have done? Well, what happened with that trial, including with the police officers that testified against Derek Chauvin, is that justice came out of that. But we shouldn't confuse that kind of justice accountability with true justice, because true justice is making sure this doesn't happen again. It is putting in some standards in place for policing, everything from banning chokeholds to changing what the standard of force is. And Cory Booker is leading our effort. I'm one of the co-sponsors of the bill and have been involved, but Cory Booker is leading the effort. He is negotiating with House and Senate. And I just think you've seen more interest than ever before because it's really hurting everyone. It didn't just happen in Minnesota.
But I wonder if it's, clearly this has had such an effect, as you say, not just in Minnesota, way beyond, but on you. You are from Minnesota. You were the county prosecutor there. And at the time, you oversaw cases of police shootings and let the grand jury make the decision about whether police should be charged. Well, whether charges should be brought. And you've said subsequently that you wish you had made the decisions yourself as the county prosecutor. You've gone through an evolution as well, which may be what the country's going through on this issue.
Yes, and back then that's how it was done. The idea was take it out of politics, have the grand jury decide. That is part of it. But the big part of it, Christiane, is that the standard needs to change. It is not every moment that you have the video that you have in the George Floyd case, that you have all the police officers testifying at a hearing. And so by changing the standard of proof from where it is to necessary, to get to necessary from where it is now, you really, really have to pass something federally and tie it in with what the states are doing. And that would make a big difference.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you so much indeed for joining us.